Right, one thing I've been trialling about is growing vegetables as perennials. Now, there are quite a few perennial vegetables around and people are encouraged to grow them, but there's common vegetables we have that we can grow as perennials or will be for 2 or 3 years. There's some advantages in this that a well-established plant, well, you don't have to replant them. Often well-established, you don't have to worry about watering to get them until they're well-established, and often looking after them is tidying them up a bit and putting a good layer of compost. It's easier than actually replanting each year. There's some disadvantages. Often they take a larger area, so if you've only got a small garden, some of these may not be practical, but I'll show you some of the experiments I have tried to talk about them. Right, spring onions. Now, they're not perfect. I can see a bit of rust on and that sort of thing, but they're about 3 years old, and when I want some, I just go and cut it off at ground level. Okay, I don't get so much of the white, it's more green, but it's still good, and I have to trim bits off, but it's still plenty there for me to use. And that's a small clump I've had there for quite a few years. I've heard of people going and buying spring onions in the supermarket. They take it home, they cut off about 2 or 3 centimetres above the roots. They use the top part and they put the roots into a pot or in the ground and grow them on. And when they grow on, they keep trimming them, and they can do quite a few trims on that. I cut it back, and often side shoots grow or the new one grows again, but it's quite useful. And I don't have to worry about planting. That's just one area of the garden. You could actually have that in your ornamental garden. You might want to keep it tidy and cut off all the dead leaves. We're better if I cut it back a bit more, but spring onions can be grown for several years from one lot. Same with leeks. Now, these I sowed those from seed over a year ago, and I used some of them, and some I didn't bother using. But I have come back to using them now. They actually went dormant, picked them up, or just cut them at ground level, and I can use them either in salads or a soup or casseroles, all sorts of things. Okay, they're a bit thinner than what you buy in the shop, so if you want big, thick ones, this may not work. I'm going to try and shift some other bowls, put them in, really feed them up and spread them out and see if that helps bigger ones. But yes, I had them leeks. I didn't use them all. I just left them in the ground. They're a bit closer. I didn't thin them all out like I meant to. They died down and came up again. Useful. I don't have to, well, I've got others to replant, but not that much. So try leeks. Broccoli. Now, I haven't got a photo. I've got a friend who's got a broccoli that is about 4 or 5 years old, and she regularly harvests little shoots from this, like on these plants from it. I have found the broccolini, they're a bit small. I prefer this. I keep picking them, and when it gets a bit untidy or they go to seed or very spindly, you cut it back hard, give it a good feed, and new ones come back. So if you get yellow flowers on, well, it's good leaving flowers for the bees, but that doesn't make that good for the broccoli. I don't tend to use this. I cut it back a bit more in winter and in summer, and I don't look after it because broccoli is really a winter vegetable. But it's gone there. I've got some that have been a couple of years old. I've got to shift some because I'm in the wrong place. It's been a good one. So I've got some seedling ones, but what I'm going to do is actually go and get suckers from these and plant them on. I remember someone telling me years ago that in places like Africa, they don't generally grow their broccoli and cabbage and that from seed. They actually get side shoots and grow it from that. So try that. If you've got a broccoli that's been really good, cut it back when the side shoots come, pull it away carefully with the roots and plant it somewhere else. And it could be 3 to 5 years. Feed it well, good compost, reasonably good water, and it does well. Same with cabbage. This is a scruffy one. I'm growing this one I found on the internet. So last year they had a market garden on Country Calendar, and they talked about how they grew their cabbages. In fact, they're growing them in pots to harvest them. They cut them off the top, sold the tops, and then they left them, and they got 2 or 3 small cabbages from each one again, and they sold though. They were a gourmet product, these small mini cabbages. If you are a large family, it's not that good, but if there's 1 or 2 in your family or a small number, having a small cabbage like that is more useful than the great big ones you often get. I can remember seeing in old garden books where they recommended you picked your cabbage, you cut it, make a cross on the top of the stalk, and generally you got 1 cabbage from each section. I don't do that. I just do just let it come away. If it's got too many or they're scruffy, I pull it off. If it's a good plant, I will get sections from the suckers that come up and plant them somewhere else. I remember a former member, she used to be Colleen and John Brown used to be members of Soil and Health. She recommended the variety Derby Day. She found that was doing very well 10, 15 years ago. And she had a whole row of that, and she just kept little cabbages coming up. So that's one you can grow perennial. Now, cauliflower, I haven't had that much success on it. The one on the right is a commercial one where it's variety. They're supposed to have lots of little heads. The one on the left is a small head I've got for mine. I need to go and feed them all up because now I'm wanting to start getting these collie and broccoli and that for my winter vegetables. I haven't bothered so much over the summer. I haven't been so successful with the cauliflowers. I've been with the broccoli or the cabbage, but I have got heads, usually small ones, 1 person serving, and I may have 3 or 4 on the plant if I've looked after it properly and fed it well. So cauliflower can be done as well. Now, some of you may not know kohlrabi. I grew up with kohlrabi, and I must admit I didn't particularly like it because my father grew them, and the carrots and the peas. My mother used to make a pea, carrot and kohlrabi mix, little cubes. She must have done a lot of work, but the carrots were often a bit woody, so were the kohlrabi, and the peas were not nice fresh ones. So it put me off for a while, but I do like kohlrabi now. These ones I planted well over a year ago, and I harvested them, and I just left the roots in the ground, and this came up. So, I cut it right back to ground level, and suddenly these plants came up and let it grow, and thought, yes, I do quite will grow kohlrabi more from summer, because the advantage of it is I grew up with cabbages, and my mother said, don't complain about the aphids or the caterpillars, it's just extra protein. And that used to annoy me. And I think I've heard a lot of people say that they loathe being told that and loathe having to eat that. The kohlrabi, if you don't know, you actually harvest it. It's actually a member of the cabbage family. It's a swollen stem, not a root. You cut it off the bottom. You actually peel it. If you actually get it fresh, you can actually pull the skin off. Otherwise, you have to peel it off with a knife, but a really fresh one. And you get rid of all the leaves and all the skin. So it doesn't matter if you've got aphids or caterpillars all over the leaf. You're not going to end up eating it. But remember that is a swollen stem. If it was a swollen root, it wouldn't grow. So I don't think this would be useful for using beetroot or anything like that, expecting that to happen. I suppose people could try, but I don't expect it to happen. Other vegetables you can worth trying. Now, I've done it with fennel, and I've got quite a few smaller fennel heads, not the big fat ones you get in the market. A lot of these don't bring that, but quite acceptable to cut up for stir fry, to roast, or use in salads. You can try it with silver beet. Not that successful, but if you cut the top off, these swollen stems will often send out another lot. Unless you've got a really good one, I think I might try. I think the new growth is a bit better, but from a new plant, but it is worthwhile trying. Parsley is also possible. I've had the stem. It's starting to go to seed. You can't use it anymore. Cut it right back, and often new stuff grows. If you cut it back in the middle of summer, you may get some more flowers because it's a proper biennial. It grows 1 year and sends up flowers each year. So that is why it's best replanting more parsley each year. and letting seed each year, but it does work. Celery's the same. I've cut it off. I've got thinner stalks, but still, if you've got a soup or a wee bit of salad, it's worthwhile doing that. This one here, just for interest, this is the Chinese tune. That is quite edible. And up here is shoots of Chinese tune that have been grown. You can actually find in some of the markets, Chinese markets, not so much. I've seen them, a seed company overseas offered to sell Chinese tune shoots. They have an onion flavour, if you know, you smell it quite well. It's quite definite, an onion flavour and nut smell, and it's good for you. And this is at someone's garden. Chinese tune is often a nuisance, that it spreads all over the place. So if you've got in the garden, as soon as it shoots up in spring, take off all the shoots except the main one you want. Pick them very small and try them and see how you like them. There could be other ones. I'd be interested to know if anyone has any others that's tried. There's a lot of things you can grow as perennial, so do try that. There's quite a few vegetables and herbs that will self-seed and be very useful in the garden. This can even be in a small garden. I've got 4 here. Now, you might be horrified by this bottom one. This is onion weed. I don't recommend you actually plant it in your garden, but if you've got an area, someone who you know has got it, it is quite a useful vegetable. Before it flowers, I'll cut the stalks, just cut them off, and I'll put them into a soup, and particularly chop them up into soup. It's not quite as strong as onion, but it still does quite well, so I can make a green vegetable. I know people who eat the flowers. I find the stalks are a little bit tough, but if you do have access, the bulbs are also edible, you can pickle, but I find they're pretty small, so I don't use them that much. When I start, I had patches of this in my garden. I start collect as soon as the ground gets wet and they start shooting up. Before they flower is the easiest way of pulling them out of the ground. And what I'm doing is any spare patches, I'm just leaving the main one, don't let it flower, but I'm trying to get rid of all the side patches. So it's one way of getting rid of a weed, but it's still useful. Watercress up the top left-hand side. Watercress I've often have growing in the garden in winter in the damp area. I don't sow it. And you don't need running water, a wet area, and it does work. You don't get the long stalks, but it's still edible and still useful. Parsley will often self-sow and it's quite good to have as an edging or put it somewhere. Lettuce. I remember someone telling me when she moved into her property, her mother brought some lettuce plants and told her to make sure you let one plant go to seed, just one, and each year let one go to seed, and then you'll never be short of lettuce. My problem is the wild birds around are eating most of my lettuce, and the ones I haven't planted out are absolutely stripped. I'm going to have to plant them out and put a cover on them. Self-seeding vegetables. There are some, but the main ones I've got here. This is Valerianella locusta. In England, it's called lamb's lettuce. In America's lamb's lettuce. In England, it's corn salad. In France, it's mush. In German country, it's Feldsalat, or my parents were Swiss, and they called it Nützli-Salat, which little nut salad. Basically, in my garden, it germinates in autumn and grows through the winter and self-seeds in spring. You can harvest it by the leaf or by the plant. Now, some of these photos, I think, are King's Seeds have got it. Quite a few of the things. If you look, lamb's lettuce, King's Seeds, and I think Egmont, they've got some larger leafed ones or just ordinary ones. I can remember an old lady I knew who she grew up in the 1940s. She said she quite often would just go and weed these out of the garden and have it for a salad. She'd just go and weed enough for a salad that day. I used to grow it underneath my asparagus. In autumn, when it was time to cut down the asparagus and the lamb's lettuce would come up, And in spring, when the asparagus started coming up, the lamb's lettuce would go to seed. The problem was, when did I mulch it and feed it? I actually got rid of that asparagus bed, but there's other areas. This will self-seed. I might collect some seed and scatter it in a new place, or even when it's flowering, pull out some of the plants that have got seeds on and just throw the plants down in a mulch where you want them to grow. It's very easy to grow. It's small. It will grow through the winter. It doesn't mind the rain. Apparently, it even grows under the snow in places in Europe. Another one, Claytonia perifoliata, or miner's lettuce. The reason it's called miner's lettuce is apparently in the Californian gold rush of the 1840s and 50s, it was one plant that grew in the desert and stopped the miners getting scurvy. You can have it as a salad, you can have it as a spinach, you can pick it when it's small like this, or you can pick it when it's flowering. This one you can just put individual leaves, or I can go with a knife, get a bunch and cut it off. I find if I pull it out, it's usually got a lot of soil, so I usually cut the top just above the crown. It can be, as I said, it's been cooked. I've cooked it, I've put it in salads, and it's fairly mild, so like the miner's lettuce, like the lamb's lettuce, it's good, but you can put other more flavourful ones, and it's a good way of having a salad in winter because it will start growing soon, and you've just got it in the garden. Sometimes it's a bit of a weed, but it's really easy to pull out, so it never becomes a problem. I've had problems with the birds liking it and just ending up with a mat of stalks because they ate every single flower. So I had to cover it. In the greenhouse, it was okay. The birds didn't get there. Outside, they did. But that's very easy to grow. And king seeds and Egmont seeds, or you may have a friend who's got that. Now, this is landcress, and in the middle of this, growing in the middle of a strawberry. This is under the one on the left is under a macadamia tree I just watered, and it's come up growing in the complete shade. They're just coming up now. My mother sent me these seeds, I'd say almost 30 years ago, and it has yellow flowers. The taste is very similar to rocket. It has the good qualities. It's very high supposed to be anti-cancer and other good qualities. And this is one that will self-sow in the garden. Once you've got it and you let it scatter the seed, it's very easy to grow. Not much eats it. And it can go in this, as the one on the left is an almost total shade. So it's still growing well there. As I said, it grows through autumn and winter, disappears during the summer. It's a bit hot and not that good in summer anyway. So this is the best time. Great for cress sandwiches or something like that, or for salads. If you mix some of that with the miner's lettuce or the lamb's lettuce, it gives a better balanced flavour. This is chervil. Unfortunately, I haven't had much chervil come up this year. There's chervil with alyssum next to it. A chervil is sometimes called French parsley. It's got a milder flavour. You can get some at other times of the year, but I just let it self-seed in the garden. I may have to scatter some seeds because I think my hens decided they really like the seeds and ate a lot of them. So I will have scatter some more seeds there. It's great, used like parsley, but slightly more aniseed flavour. I like it. It's finer than parsley, not as coarse, but it's great to mix in other salads, to have with eggs or anything like that, where you want a bit of flavour with any sort of vegetables. Basically, experiment. I'd love to hear of other things, plants that you have got that's growing by themselves or self-seeding, and you don't actually have to look after them a lot and make easy garden. Of course, some of these, if you've got a tiny garden, very limited space, they may not work for you, but many times they will if you've got more room. So experiment, try,